The only reason we're not all sitting here in the dark is because we agree it's unacceptable to flip the light switch off in a room full of people. But what if that light switch were online, available to anyone with an internet connection? How long do you think the lights would stay on? Well, this might sound like a bit of an extreme scenario, but it's not that far off from what's actually happening with our OT, that is operational technology infrastructure. Once inherently secure through physical isolation, these systems are being connected through the internet, making them increasingly vulnerable to cyber attacks. And the consequences of this are far from a hypothetical. A 2024 report by Palo Alto Networks revealed that nearly 70% of respondents had experienced cyber attacks targeting their OT environments. And these aren't just numbers. These are real threats to the critical infrastructure that we rely on for clean drinking water and the energy that keeps the lights on over our heads. And this is a problem we should have been solving yesterday. But since we can't change the past, we need to act today and innovate on ways to solve this problem. And that's what I want to walk you through today in our paper, Characterizing Cyber Attacks Against Operational Technology Infrastructure Through the Lens of Cyber Attack Flows. We introduce new metrics to quantify OT cyber attacks, a methodology for analyzing them through cyber attack flows, and actionable insights to guide defense. I'm Sherman Kettner, a recent MS graduate from UCCS, and over the past year, I focused my research alongside Caleb Chang, who will present next. Dr. Zhu has been mentoring us, and a PhD student, recent grad, Dr. Ear, who is unable to make it today, along with support from Viceroy. And we focused on understanding and addressing the growing cyber threat to OT systems. And this presentation is going to distill the findings of that work. We're going to back them by case studies and metrics and put it into a framework that we hope will push the conversation forwards. And speaking of pushing the conversation forwards, whether in this presentation or just in any subject more broadly, the first step is quantification, and the first step to quantifying something is to define some metrics we can measure. So let's start there. These metrics are going to form the basis for assessing the severity, the techniques, and the impacts of our attacks. So our first metric here, attack complexity, simply measures the number of techniques used by any given attack, and we use this to measure the sophistication of the attack. We'll talk about what a technique is in a little bit. Attack persistence time measures the amount of time an attacker spent in the network before launching their attack. And attack impact measures how disruptive an attack was using two sub-metrics. These are recovery time, the amount of time it takes to restore normal service, and service degradation, which is the maximum service disruption experienced by any given attack. Now that we have a structure, we need some analysis, something we can apply our metrics to. And often the easiest way to perform analysis is with some sort of a graph. We're not going to use a pie chart or a bar graph. We're going to use a computer science style network graph, which consists of nodes. These are the boxes. Each node is either a system, an application, or a user. So here we have an attacker going after a Windows computer. They go through a print spooler, another Windows computer, before finally reaching their impact point of a centrifuge. Each of these nodes is then connected by what we call edges. These are the blue numbers underneath. An edge can loop back on the same node, in which case we don't represent it, or it can connect us to another node. Our edges are MITRE attack techniques, and these are the techniques I mentioned I would talk about in a second. So all we have to do to get the attack complexity of the Stuxnet attack is count these numbers down here. I'll give you a second. Okay, I'll actually do it for you. There's 19 of them. So we have our attack complexity is 19. Our attack persistence time, not represented on the graph, but discovered through research, is 390 to 94 days, depending on which version of Stuxnet it was that reached our centrifuge. And our attack impact has a recovery time of 2 years and a service degradation between 16 and 50%. 16% being the percentage of centrifuges that were destroyed, and 50% being additional damage caused on top of that. We also cover 3 other attacks in our paper. However, I don't have time for that today, so we are going to quickly move along. Now that we've walked through the flow, let's see what we discovered along the way. So we applied our 3 metrics to all of the attacks overall, and the things we discovered was, first, although Stuxnet had the highest attack complexity at 19, we were wondering if attack complexity would be related to attack impact. It does not appear to be, as although Stuxnet did cause some damage, it did not cause any more than some of the other attacks we looked at. Attack persistence time is complicated by the fact that there are differing natures of attacks, obviously. For example, one of the attacks we looked at was the Mariachi Shire sewer attack, which was carried out by an insider. And it's hard to measure when an insider becomes an attacker. At what point do they make that transition? However, generally speaking, longer persistence enables more complex and potentially coordinated attacks. And finally, for the third point, even though it was not related to attack complexity, we were wondering if recovery time might be related to service degradation. And again, that does not appear to be the case. The Mariachi Shire sewer attack had zero zero service degradation, but recovery time measured in the days, if not weeks. While for the Ukrainian power grid attack, the service degradation was 100%, but the recovery time was 3 days. However, even though our metrics might not have aligned the way we wanted them to, we did still learn a lot from applying them and from making our attack flows. So the 3 big takeaways we had were, first, all 4 attacks, the attackers had a deep understanding of their target before striking, showing that detailed reconnaissance is going to be a prerequisite for success in an OT environment, meaning that as defenders, what we need to do is we need to obfuscate key system details, such as the type of hardware we're using or even the type of firmware running on that hardware. Second, we found 2 key patterns for how attackers gain access. The first one is that it's always going to involve some human involvement, so we need to train our operators to be more cyber aware, thereby reducing our risk of cyber attack. And second, attacks were almost always transferred from the IT environment over to the OT environment. And this becomes even more important when we look at our third point, which is that once an attack reaches the OT environment, it always is going to cause some form of damage. So in order to prevent that damage, we need to stop the attack from ever making it into our OT environment. This can be done through things like network segmentation and zero trust. So with those lessons in mind, let's pivot back to the big picture. OT network vulnerabilities may be a problem we should have solved yesterday, but the only way to catch up is by working even harder today. Our paper takes steps in that direction by defining new metrics, analyzing attacks through structured flows, and extracting meaningful insights to guide defense. I hope I gave you some inspiration, but there's still more to do. More metrics to define, more attacks to analyze, and more insights to uncover. And most importantly, those insights must be studied, implemented, and improved so we can begin to take back the initiative on securing our OT infrastructure. This is something that affects all of us because OT systems are the foundation of modern life. They give us clean water, stable transportation, and the energy we depend on. So let's start winning together and keep the lights on.
We actually have time for a question. That was very crisp. Any questions for Sherman?
Can we get a copy of your paper?
I believe it is in the...
Yes, so you can get a copy of all the students' papers because we have this special journal, the MCPA, some Military Cyber Affairs magazine. Also, there's a UC2 student who's represented here. And also, 2 of our papers are also in the Cyber magazine. 3 of them are in the Cyber magazine here too. So yes, they're all right here. Thank you.
If we have more time, otherwise I can take questions after.
Another question?
You mentioned that 100% of the attacks involved some sort of human interaction.
Mm-hmm.
How did you guys come to that conclusion? Like, is it because of the segmentation? Someone needs to move something from one place to another? Like, I mean. So
normally it's actually on the entrance that the human involvement is. So like Stuxnet, for example, it is believed that it was a USB. Someone carried a USB in. So that's the human involvement to get that through the air-gapped system, right? A lot of times it's also like phishing. That is how they get into a system. So that's normally the human involvement we're talking about.
Excellent. Thank you. Good job.